Back when I got my first PlayStation 1 many years ago, I was introduced to some absolute classics from the at the time current library of the PS1. Medal of Honor Underground 2, Dino Crisis, Wipeout, and as you would have guessed, Final Fantasy VIII, my first entry into this remarkable series and to JRPGs entirely. It's no question that this is my favourite game in this series for a number of reasons. The music, the story, the characters, the setting, the time travel / bootstrap paradox plot, and even though I know it can be controversial, the mechanics. I loved everything about it, and I still do to this day. Final Fantasy VIII tells the story of Squall Leonhardt, a young mercenary cadet who became embroiled in a war that spans across space and time and ultimately finds him reluctantly coming face to face with his own destiny. Here, I would like to talk about the cover arts of the European, North American, and Japanese releases. The European cover has the simplest design of all three of them, with a clear white background and the artwork of Squall and Rinoa behind the title text of Final Fantasy VIII. Now there's not too much that can be said about this because it really is just as simple as it gets. That's not to say it's a bad design, all of the European PlayStation releases up to this point have done the same, and it has a very nice uniform look, and personally, I think it looks really cool to keep it just like that. The style of art is very distinctive, and for fans of the series can be quickly identified as Yoshitaka Amano's work. Here we see our protagonist Squall embracing Rinoa, symbolising that this was the first official entry in the Final Fantasy series that had a love line as one of its main themes. The way the bottom of the image seems to turn into a swirl seems to point to the theme of travelling through time and space, and is very reminiscent of the time distortion that happens towards the end of the game too, which plays a vital part of the story. Having it as part of the cover is a nice nod towards it without giving anything away. I believe that the colours used also have a number of great meanings for the characters with their mixing. While Rinoa and Squall may have blue and white and black as their main colours respectively, the artwork colours really tell a lot about them. The yellow shows the optimism, joy and happiness of the group that Squall eventually comes to understand himself after so many years of being closed off and isolated. Orange symbolises adventure, excitement and vitality, showing that this group is going on a journey that will change their lives forever, despite them all being predestined. And finally, red is the colour of sacrifice, bravery, danger, and of course love, very large themes that play a pivotal role. This likely wasn't part of the concept, but to me all the colours seem to represent each member of the group that supports them on their journey. Selphie is yellow, Quistis is orange, Zell is red, and Irvine is a light brown. It appears to show that all the members of your team help Squall become a better person, to break out of his shell and to understand that people around him aren't a hindrance, they're a blessing. And finally, I like to think that with the embracing of the two, along with the choice of colours, it points to the moment that the two shared on the bridge at Fisherman's Horizon, when Squall carried an unconscious Rinoa to get her help. We can see that she has her eyes closed, her arm is draped over his shoulder, and Squall is looking serious and concerned. It's in this moment that he lets out his feelings to her, a big step in his character development, while looking out onto the horizon as the sun sets over the sea. One of its other main themes was that of loneliness. While most of the cast seem to have certain levels of loneliness in their lives, it's clear that Squall struggles a lot due to his past at the orphanage and the loss of his big sister alone. The cover shows Squall looking quite sad and conflicted, which could be from his concern for Rinoa at the previously mentioned Fisherman's Horizon walk, but maybe his internal conflict with himself, and how this mission of destiny is changing him, and how he realises that it can't be done alone and must be with others. Even though Rinoa is with them in the image, seeing Squall essentially on his own amidst nothing but white gives the impression of isolation. As you'll find out with the next two game covers, this is the only one that doesn't have any reference to Squall's rival Seifer in some way, only sticking to these two alone. As was the theme for Final Fantasy games, the font used is the same in bold black letters, with a slight shadowing underneath and a thin white outline. We can also see the old Squaresoft logo, which was used before they merged with Enix to make Square Enix in 2003. As is usual with North American releases, there's less artwork and more CG characters in place. We see this happen fairly often, which does make it look a little less appealing than the others, but still has a nice and unique style to it. Here we see Squall, Rinoa and Seifer in the front, and Adia, or Ultimecia, in the background with the Final Fantasy VIII logo. The first thing I would like to point out is that this game has a very heavy theme of duality, and it's clear from the cover between the four characters. Let's start with the two rivals, Squall and Seifer. Squall has long dark hair, while Seifer's is short and light. Squall's jacket is short and black, while Seifer's is long and white. Squall's scar goes from top right to bottom left, while Sifa's go top left to bottom right. Squall's collar is shapeless and furry, while Sifa's is shaped and stiff. Aside from them also having both a romantic interest in Rinoa at separate times, another similarity they have is they both bear crosses. Squall's is on the head of a lion, Grieva, with a cross underneath it, while Sifa's is very reminiscent to the cross of St. James. These could be a reference to the fact that they both have great burdens, crosses to bear as it were, things only they can do. For Sifa, it's fighting against the world in an effort to make his dream of being a sorceress's knight come true, and for Squall, it's making sure that the same sorceress is destined to be defeated, time and time again. For Rinoa and Ultimecia, there are Rinoa's hair is loose and flowing, while Adia's is held back in place. Rinoa's outfit is very simple, while Adia's is loud and extravagant. Blue is a colour that symbolises peace and tranquility, while purple symbolises wealth, power, and ambition. With their appearances, there is a great contrast between the two, and not just a choice of clothing. Rinoa looks young, innocent, and happy, while Adia looks somber, powerful, and bears resemblance to some kind of demon. Rinoa has angel wings on her back, just barely visible there, that give an image of peace and comfort, that she's a good and honest person. Adia, on the other hand, looms over all of them in a stance that symbolises some kind of religious saviour pose. As she was persecuted by people for simply being a sorceress, something she couldn't control, she grew to hate them and found them to be pathetic and worthless. She's above them. She is a god compared to them, and that is her ultimate goal. One way to put this duality between them would be Rinoa doesn't just act nice, she is nice through her actions of trying to help people, while Adia acts nice, but isn't, with manipulating Vinza Daling and the people of Galbadia and Seifer into following her. It's unclear as to where Adia actually is, given the background is just black, but I would assume this is either as she's about to make her speech to the people of Daling, or when she's standing atop her seat during the parade. Adia in this image, likely by pure coincidence, seems to also have parts that somewhat show each of the main characters on the cover. She wears dark clothing with a feathered collar like Squall, a piece of long flowing white clothing like Sifa, and representations of something divine or angelic like Rinoa. Could just be me looking too much into it, but something interesting to know either way. Instead of just having the Final Fantasy VIII text on the cover, they decided to use Yoshitaka Amano's artwork featuring Squall and Rinoa. Bit of an odd choice personally, as it makes it look a little too cluttered, but it does make the title pop more and gives off the same themes and nods as mentioned previously. And finally, aside from the Squaresoft logo, the North American cover is the only one that features that it's a 4-disc game. The Japanese cover is just as simplistic as the European cover and doesn't have much else going on apart from the symbols down the left hand side, so this section will be pretty short. Everything about the logo has already been covered earlier on. The only things that can be said about it is that it's noticeably smaller in the centre of the cover and has Japanese text underneath it that is simply a direct translation of the English above, pronounced Finary Fantasy VIII. Again, like the European cover, it has just a simple white background, which is common for both the European and Japanese covers, except with the addition of symbols down the side that represent 3 characters from the game. The top is Griever for Squall, the Cross of St. James, or what heavily inspired it, for Seifer, and an angel wing for Rinoa. Squall's iconic symbol is featured throughout the game in a few ways, notably his necklace, his ring, on his gunblade along with its case, and the Guardian Force summoned by Ultimecia in the final battle. Squall admires lions for their strength and their pride, and often tries to attribute this to himself in overcoming the challenges that he faces either through training to become a seed, or the troubles he's had to go through from an early age. At times he appears weak and confused, but still tries to keep that stoic and strong shell intact even at the risk of losing people close to him, as he sees it as inevitable pain. Lions are known for their natural skills as leaders too, which sets him up for his destiny to become the legendary seed later on. It causes him great conflict in the story, with him wanting to adopt these traits and become the lion he looks up to, but alienates himself from others and tends to be alone. But for him, it's a role that he is destined to fill, and when he realises this after fighting the great enemy in a summoned Griever, he knows that he has the strength to become what he wants and needs to be. Interestingly, in the French version of the game, Griever is known as Chronos, which has heavy representations and meanings with the concept of time in pre-Socratic philosophy that ties in with the theme of time travel. As was mentioned briefly in the North American cover, Renoa's wings represent the naturally good person she is and how everything that she attempts to do, whether it's the best idea or not, is for the betterment of the people. Standing against tyranny defiantly, but believing that fighting isn't always the only option. Her ideals and viewpoints of the world may be naive and often ill-judged, but in her heart she longs for peace and happiness, and she will try and see it through because that's just the person she is. The wings symbolise protection and harmony that she wishes for her loved ones as well as the people of the world, and in a way also shows the light in the darkness. When all seems lost or the enemy seems too great, it's hope that often gets us through. Sifa's symbol is featured in bold red on his white jacket. The Cross of St. James was a symbol used primarily in the Middle Ages by the Order of Santiago, and theorists believe it represented the defense of the faith in their Lord, the use of weapons to defend said faith, and was coloured red to signify the blood spilled by the Christian army for their faith. For Sifa, this has great connections to his personality and role in the story. He has a deep love, admiration and desire to be the knight of a sorceress that he saw in an old movie that birthed his ideals. Wanting a place in the world that he could use his power, display his loyalty and live out his dream, he also chose a gunblade as his weapon, Hyperion, which also bears some resemblance to the cross. Thus we can take from it that, just like the Order of Santiago, he will defend the sorceress, use his weapon in her name, and spill as much blood as he needs to defend her and her ideals. While he may not have been the best fighter in the game, being defeated somewhat easily each time he's encountered, it's clear that he stood up for what he truly believed in himself, and did what he could to keep his dream alive and become the knight he always envisioned. Typically, the Cross of St. James has fleur-de-lis on its handles, which represents the honour of knights. The lack of them, or the very toned-down design, could represent Sifa's lost or lack of honour in turning to Sorceress Ultimecia, who means great harm for the world, simply so he could fulfill his dream. As individual symbols, they all seem to represent one character each, but together, they also represent one of the endgame bosses created by Ultimecia, the manifestation in Squall's mind that is the most powerful being to him, Griever. Its boss design incorporates all three of these elements. The overall design of a humanoid lion-like creature, wings that look somewhat angelic with their feathers, and sharp protrusions coming from its horns, arms, and tail. While the whole party and others surrounding them played great roles, it seems as though Squall, Renoa, and Sifa are the ones that play the biggest parts. In different ways, they've caused this to happen exactly as they should have, in order to have their destiny fulfilled. While they may not have all been on the same side, have had equal skills, or even been present in the final battle, they all contributed in their own ways to ensure that the cycle of fate is complete. The sorceress is defeated, time is distorted to allow Edea to inherit the power, and for Squall to now sow the seed of Seed. As usual, it's hard to decide between which three I like best as they're all quite different. The European one is simple, and that makes it stand out quite a lot. The North American version has a lot going on, but it's nice to see the characters on the cover. And the Japanese one is simplistic too, but adds that little bit of extra detail that suits it so well. But personally, I think the European one stands out the best with its Yoshitaka Amano artwork. It's classic. Which cover art do you feel is the best one? Let me know.